The voices demanded that Fong Yuan quietly hand over the spring-autumn cicada, promising him a quick death in return. They called him an old bastard and told him to stop attempting to resist any longer, noting that all the major factions of justice had combined to destroy his devil lair. They claimed the place was covered in inescapable nets and that he would definitely be decapitated this time. They cursed him as a demon, stating that because he wanted to cultivate the spring-autumn cicada, he had killed thousands of people and committed too many unforgivable, heinous sins. One woman shouted that 300 years prior, he had insulted her, taken away her body's purity, killed her entire family, and executed her 9 generations. She declared that from that moment onwards, she had hated him with a burning passion and wanted him to die that day. Fong Yuan wore deep green robes that had been torn to shreds. His hair was disheveled, and his entire body was covered in blood. He looked around as his bloody robes waved lightly in the mountain breeze like a war flag. Fresh blood flowed from the numerous wounds on his body. Just by standing there for a short while, Fong Yuan had already accumulated a large pool of blood beneath his feet. Enemies surrounded him on all sides, and there was no longer a way out. It was a foregone conclusion that he would die there. Fong Yuan understood his situation clearly, but even in the face of death, his expression did not change. It was calm and his gaze was quiet, his eyes like deep pools of water in a well, so deep that there seemed to be no end. The major factions of justice surrounding him included not only experienced elders, but also young and talented heroes. Some were roaring and others were sneering. Some eyes gleamed with light, while some individuals held their wounds while looking on fearfully. They did not move, as everyone was wary of Fong Yuan's final attack. This tense moment lasted for 6 hours until evening arrived, with the sun casting its rays upon the side of the mountain. In that moment, it was as if the place was on fire. Fong Yuan, who had been as silent as a sculpture, slowly turned his body. The group of warriors was suddenly alerted and took a large step backwards. By then, the gray mountain rock beneath Fong Yuan's feet had been stained a deep red. His face had become deathly pale, yet in the afterglow of the sunset, it suddenly had a brilliant luster. Looking at the setting sun, Fong Yuan lightly laughed. He remarked that the sun set above the blue mountain and the autumn moon moved with the spring wind. He noted that the morning was fine like hair and the night was like snow, and whether one succeeded or failed, there was nothing left when looking back. As he said this, memories of his previous life on Earth emerged. He was originally a Chinese scholar on Earth who had chanced upon this world. He had endured a hard life for 300 years and went through another 200 years of struggle. Over 500 years of his life had flown by in the blink of an eye. So many memories buried deep inside his heart began to relive themselves. He sighed in his heart, feeling that he had failed in the end, yet he had no regrets. This result was something he had foreseen when he made his decision in the beginning. He had prepared himself for this, believing that to be a demon was to be merciless and cruel, a murderer and a destroyer. He knew there was no place in heaven or earth for such a thing, and that turning into an enemy of the world meant facing the consequences. He thought that if the spring-autumn cicada he had just cultivated was effective, he would still be a demon in his next life. With this thought, Fong Yuan let out a big laugh. The group of warlords asked what the wicked demon was laughing about and warned everyone to be careful because the demon was going to attack. They urged him to surrender the spring-autumn cicada before his final moments. At that moment, the group surged forward, and with a loud bang, Fong Yuan was engulfed in a blinding surge of energy. The spring rain quietly fell on Qing Mao Mountain late at night. A slight breeze blew with the light rain, yet the mountain was not covered in darkness. Dozens of tiny lights from tall buildings shone like a bright band. Situated on the mountain was the Guyu village, giving the vast, lonely mountain a touch of human civilization. In the middle of the village was a magnificent pavilion where a grand ceremony was being held. The head of the Guyu clan knelt on the brownish-yellow floor in ceremonial white robes. He prayed sincerely to the ancestors to bless them and hoped that the ceremony would bring many young men of outstanding talent and intelligence to provide the families with new blood and hope. Behind him, over 10 people knelt in a similar fashion. They were the clan's elders and important members who held much authority. After finishing the prayers, the clan head kowtowed, and the elders solemnly followed suit, filling the hall with the sound of light thuds. When the ceremony was over, the crowd walked out of the temple, and the atmosphere loosened as discussions began. The elders remarked that time flew too quickly and that a year had gone by in the blink of an eye. They wondered what new clan blood would show up this year, and expressed hope for a highly talented youth, noting that the clan had not seen a genius emerge for 3 years. They agreed that neighboring villages had seen talented geniuses appear, especially by Ning Bing from the Bai clan, whose talent was terrifying. The elders showed worry, as Bai Ning Bing had already reached level 3 in just 2 years of training. However, they noted that hope was not lost for their own youth. They mentioned that a young genius had appeared on Feng Zhi's side who was able to talk after 3 months and walk after 4. They noted that at 5 years of age, he was able to recite poetry and seemed exceptionally intelligent. They lamented that his parents had died early and that he was being raised by his uncle and aunt, but they acknowledged his wisdom and big ambitions. The Guyu clan head heard these discussions and knew the elders were talking about Guyu Fangyuan. He considered that if his child showed great potential, he could compete against Bai Ningbing. He hoped the boy might even be A-grade. The clan head told the elders that the hour was late and that they should rest well to prepare for the opening ceremony. He warned them to compete for the young geniuses fair and square, without tricks or conspiracies that could damage the clan's unity. The elders promised they would not dare to do such things and dispersed. The clan head looked out the window at the village lights, noting the excited and tense atmosphere. He sighed, viewing the lights as the hope for the clan's future. At the same moment, a pair of clear eyes looked at the same lights with complex feelings. Inside Guyu village, Feng Yuan realized he was back 500 years in the past, and that the spring-autumn cicada had successfully worked. He stood by the window, letting the rain hit his body. He reflected on the spring-autumn cicada being ranked 7th in the 10 big mystical goo and its ability to reverse time. He stretched out his hand, looking at his young, pale palms, and embraced the truth of his reality. He sighed that 500 years of experience felt like a dream, but he knew clearly that it was not. It was said in legend that a river of time existed in that world. It supported the world's time flow and circulation, and by using the power of the spring-autumn cicada, one could travel back upstream and return to the past. There was much conflicting opinion on this mythical tale. Many did not believe in it, and some were skeptical of the truth. Few people actually dared to believe it, because every time someone used the spring-autumn cicada, they had to pay with their life, letting their entire body and cultivation serve as the driving force for its power. Such a price was simply too expensive, and what people could not accept was the fact that after paying with one's life, the outcome remained unknown. Therefore, even if someone possessed the spring-autumn cicada, they would not dare use it so indiscriminately. They feared the rumors might be fake or merely a scam. If Feng Yuan had not been cornered into such a state, he would also not have used it so hurriedly. However, he was now thoroughly convinced because the reality of the truth had been laid before his eyes, and there was no denying it. He had really been reborn. He thought with a sigh that it was a pity that from the start, he had wasted an absurd amount of effort killing hundreds of thousands of people, making even the heavens furious and inciting people's vengeance. He had endured suffering and multiple hardships to finally attain and refine that goo. Even though he had been reborn, the spring-autumn cicada had not come with him. Humans were considered the greatest among thousands of creatures, while goo were the essence of heaven and earth. Goo came in thousands of shapes and sizes, exhibiting a strange and mysterious variety. There were too many to count. Some goo would completely dissipate after being used once, twice, or thrice, while some goo could be reused again and again as long as they were not used beyond their limits. That said, it was probable that the spring-autumn cicada was one of those types that could only be used once before disappearing for good. But even if it was gone, Feng Yuan believed he could still refine another. He had done it in his previous life, so he saw no reason why he could not do it in this one. After his thoughts of pity were put aside, Feng Yuan's heart burst forth with ambitious and determined feelings. The fact that he was able to be reborn made the loss of the spring-autumn cicada entirely acceptable, especially since he still possessed something precious. He had not lost everything. His precious treasure was his 500 years' worth of memories and experience. In his memories were a multitude of all kinds of treasures and precious items that no one had opened yet in that time. He could easily grasp all the big events and incidents by the veins of history. There were a countless number of figures. Some were predecessors of hidden levels, some were geniuses, and some are people not even born yet. Also, in those 500 years of life were memories of painstaking cultivation and rich combat experience. With all those memories and experiences, he had undeniably grasped the overall situation and upcoming opportunities. With good planning and execution, he could empower his situation with great fierceness and elegance. It was no longer a problem for him to take a step ahead of others and break through higher boundaries. Feng Yuan wondered how he should go about this. He was incredibly sensible as he collected himself and faced the night rain outside the window, pondering his options. Things started to feel complicated. After thinking for a moment, his brows wrinkled deeper. 500 years of time was a rather long period. He did not even mention those long, muddled memories that could not be recalled, but even remembering the hidden locations of treasures or special encounters with people was a lot to manage. The main issue was that the locations were separated by long distances and had to be accessed or visited at certain periods of time. He realized that the most important thing was cultivation. His primeval sea had not even opened yet, and he had not stepped onto the path to be a Gu master. He was just a mortal. He knew he had to hurry and cultivate, catching up to history and seizing opportunities with the best advantage. He did not forget that many of those hidden treasure locations were useless without a proper foundation. Instead, visiting them would just be like walking into a wolf's den looking for death. The problem in front of Feng Yuan at that moment was cultivation. He had to increase the level of his foundation as fast as possible. If he were as slow as he had been in his previous life, he would be too late. To cultivate as fast as possible, he knew he would have to borrow resources from the clan. In his current state, he had no power or ability to travel back and forth across the dangerous mountains. Even an ordinary mountain boar could take his life. If he could reach the cultivation of a rank 3 Gu master, he would have the means to protect himself and leave the mountain. Through the eyes of a 500-year-old person who had cultivated in the demonic way, Qing Mao Mountain was just way too small. Guyu Village even felt like a cage. But while the cage restricted freedom, the sturdy bars of the cage also brought about a certain kind of safety. He decided that in that short period of time, he would stay in that cage. As soon as he could reach rank 3, he could leave that poor mountain. Luckily, the awakening ceremony was the following day, and he would be able to start training as a Gu master soon after. When he thought about the awakening ceremony, old memories that had long been buried in his heart resurfaced. He sneered at the thought of talent. His gaze focused out the window. At that moment, the door to his room was lightly pushed open, and a young teenager walked in. The youth asked his big brother why he was standing in the rain by the window. The youth was thin and slightly shorter than Feng Yuan, but his face resembled Feng Yuan's features greatly. As Feng Yuan turned his head to look at the young man, a complicated look flickered across his face. He noted that it was his twin little brother. He raised his eyebrows, his expression returning to cold indifference. Feng Zheng lowered his head and looked at his own toes, which was his signature stance. He explained that he saw his big brother's window was not shut, so he thought he would come in and close it. He reminded Feng Yuan that the awakening ceremony was the next day and that it was late, yet he had not gone to bed. He added that if their uncle and aunt knew, they would probably be worried. Feng Zheng was not surprised at Feng Yuan's coldness. Ever since he was a small child, his older brother had always been like that. Sometimes he wondered if a genius was just like that, being rather different from ordinary people. Even though he had the same look as his older brother, he felt that he was as ordinary as an ant. They were born from the same womb at the same time, yet he wondered why the heavens were so unfair. His older brother had been endowed with gleaming talent, while he himself was as ordinary as a stone. Everyone around him would say that he was just Feng Yuan's little brother. When they mentioned him, his aunt and uncle would constantly tell him to learn from his older brother. Even when he looked in the mirror, he would sometimes feel disgusted as he saw his own face. Those thoughts had been ongoing for many years, accumulating day and night and pressing against his heart like a giant stone. In recent years, Feng Zheng's head had lowered more and more, and he had grown quieter. At the thought of his aunt and uncle being worried, Feng Yuan laughed silently. He could still remember clearly how the parents of that world had both lost their lives in one of the clan missions when he was only 3 years old. He and his little brother had become orphans. In the name of upbringing, his aunt and uncle had grabbed hold of the inheritance left behind by his parents while inflicting harsh treatment against his younger brother and himself. He originally planned to just be a normal person, even planning to conceal his abilities and bide his time. However, his life was difficult, leaving Feng Yuan with no choice but to expose some of his talents. His so-called talent was merely a mature and intellectual soul that carried a few of Earth's popular ancient poems. With those, he managed to startle people and capture attention. Because of pressure from the outside world, the young Feng Yuan had made a decision to keep a cold, indifferent expression to protect himself, reducing the possibility of revealing any secrets. Over time, that coldness became a habit he was accustomed to expressing. Thus, his aunt and uncle were no longer harsh on him and his younger brother. As the years passed and they got older, the future became more optimistic and their treatment improved. Feng Yuan knew that was not love, but a type of investment. It was hilarious to him how his little brother never saw that truth. Not only was he deceived by their aunt and uncle, but he also started bearing resentment. Although he looked like a good-natured and honest boy then, in Feng Yuan's memories, when his brother was found to have A-grade talent, the clan spent much effort in raising him with all they had. After that, all the buried resentment, jealousy, and hate inside was released, and many times Feng Zheng would target, suppress, and make life difficult for his own older brother. As for Feng Yuan's own grade, it was only C-grade talent. Fate loved to play a joke. In a pair of twins, the older one only had C-grade talent, but had been known as a genius for a dozen years, while the younger one, who was always overlooked, was the one with A-grade talent instead. The results of the awakening ceremony had left the clan shocked. The treatment of the two brothers had suddenly reversed. After that, the younger brother was like a dragon rising up to the heavens, while the older brother was like a phoenix that fell to the earth. Following that came many hardships and troubles from his own younger brother, the cold eyes of his aunt and uncle, and the contempt of the clan's people. Feng Yuan had hated it in his previous life. He had hated his own lack of talent, how heartless the clan was, and how unfair fate had been. But now, with his 500 years of life experience used to rethink that course, his heart was actually calm without a shred of hatred. He wondered what there was to be gained from resentment. Thinking about it from another point of view, he could understand his younger brother, his aunt and uncle, and even those enemies from 500 years later who had attacked him. The strong ate the weak, and survival of the fittest had always been the rules of that world. Everyone had their own ambitions and was always struggling to grasp opportunities among all the war and killing. He felt there was nothing that could not be understood. 500 years of life experience had long allowed him to understand all of that. With a heart that wanted to gain immortality, he decided that if someone tried to prevent his pursuit, no matter who it was, he would kill them and live through it. The aspirations in his heart were too big. Stepping onto that road meant making the world his enemy, and it was destined to be a lonely path filled with killing. That was the conclusion of his 500 years of life. Revenge was not his intention, as the demonic path did not compromise. With that, he could not help but laugh and gave his younger brother a faint glance, telling him that he could leave. Fang Zheng's heart shook as he felt like his brother's eyes were sharp like an ice blade, seemingly penetrating the deepest parts of his heart. Under such a gaze, he felt as if he were naked in the snow, unable to hold any secrets. He said that he would see his brother the next day, and not daring to say any more, Fang Zheng slowly closed the door and left. The patrolling night watchman banged his wooden clappers in a rhythm that echoed through the high-pillared houses. Fang Yuan opened his dry eyelids while silently reflecting that it was already the hour before dawn. He had been lying in bed for a long time the previous night, having devised many plans and only sleeping for a little over 2 hours. Because his body had not yet started cultivating, his energy was not vigorous, leaving both his body and mind shrouded in exhaustion. However, with 500 years of experience, Fang Yuan had long since built a deep, steel-like determination, making such sleep-deprived exhaustion insignificant to him. He immediately shoved away the thin silk blanket and rose neatly. Upon opening the window, he found that the spring rain had stopped, and he was greeted by the mixed fragrances of earth, trees, and wildflowers. Fang Yuan felt his head clear as his sleepiness washed away. At that moment, the sun had not yet risen. The sky remained a deep dark blue, neither fully dark nor yet bright. Looking around, he saw the tall houses made of green bamboo and wood, which contrasted with the mountain in a sea of pale green. These structures had at least 2 floors, a design unique to the mountain folk due to the uneven terrain, where the first floor consisted of massive wooden stakes, while the second floor served as the residence. Both Fang Yuan and his brother, Fang Zheng, stayed on the second floor. At that moment, the voice of his personal servant, Shun Shui, floated up from downstairs as she informed young Master Fang Yuan that she was coming upstairs to wait on him while he washed. Looking down, Fang Yuan saw her. While her looks were only slightly above average, she dressed well in a green robe with long sleeves and trousers, embroidered shoes, and a pearl hairpin in her black hair. Her entire being radiated youthful vitality. She looked happily at Fang Yuan while carrying a basin of water upstairs. The water was at a comfortable temperature for washing his face. After rinsing his mouth, he used a willow twig with snow salt to clean his teeth. Shin Shui waited gently with a smile and lively eyes, and once he was finished, she helped him dress. During the process, her chest rubbed against his elbow or back several times, but Fang Yuan's expression remained blank and his heart stayed as calm as water. To him, this servant girl was merely a spy for his aunt and uncle, a vain and heartless person. In his previous life, she had enraptured him, but after the awakening ceremony, when his status plummeted, she had quickly turned away and treated him with disdain. When Fang Zheng arrived, he saw Shun Shui smoothing the creases on the clothing over Fang Yuan's chest, causing a flicker of jealousy in his eyes. Having lived with his older brother under their aunt and uncle's care, Fang Zheng also had a servant, but his was a fat, elderly woman rather than a youthful girl. Fang Zheng wondered when Shun Shui might wait on him in such a manner and what that would feel like. However, he did not dare speak up, as his aunt and uncle's favoritism toward Fang Yuan was no secret. Originally, Fang Zheng did not even have a servant. It was Fang Yuan who had taken the initiative to ask for one for him. Despite the status difference between master and servant, Fang Zheng did not dare underestimate Shin Shui, because her mother, Mother Shun, was a high-ranking caretaker in their aunt and uncle's household who possessed significant authority. Fang Yuan eventually brushed away Shun Shui's soft hands, impatiently noting that there was no need to continue tidying up as his clothing was already neat. He realized she was merely trying to seduce him to secure her future, believing that if he had A-grade talent, she could elevate her status from servant to concubine. While Fang Yuan had been deceived by her in his previous life, he was now clear-eyed and cold-hearted. He told her she could leave without even looking at her. Shun Shui pouted, finding his behavior odd and upsetting, but she was intimidated by his cold nature. Though she wanted to respond petulantly, she ultimately obeyed and retreated. Fang Yuan then asked Fang Zheng if he was ready. His younger brother stood at the doorway with his head bowed, muttering that he was. Fang Zheng had been awake since the fourth watch, too nervous to sleep, and his eyes were marked with dark circles. Fang Yuan nodded. While he had not understood his brother's thoughts in his previous life, he now understood them perfectly. To him, however, those feelings were currently meaningless, so he simply stated that they should depart. The two brothers left the house and encountered many youths of a similar age heading to the same destination. They overheard cautious whispers from the groups, with some pointing out the Fang brothers. They noted that the one in front was Fang Yuan, the one who had composed the famous poems. Some observers remarked on his expressionless face and apparent disregard for others, while others defended him, suggesting that anyone with his talent would naturally act that way. Fang Zheng listened to this silently, accustomed to such discussions, and followed his brother with his head low. By then, the dawn light was casting Fang Yuan's shadow over Fang Zheng's face. As the sun rose, Fang Zheng felt as though he were walking into darkness, a darkness emanating from his older brother. He feared that in this life, he might never escape his brother's immense shadow, and the pressure on his chest made it difficult to breathe, even evoking a sense of suffocation. Fang Yuan sneered inwardly at the gossip, reflecting that outstanding talent naturally invited jealousy. He recalled how, in his previous life, the announcement of his C-grade talent had led to immediate disdain and coldness. He noticed Fang Zheng's labored breathing and realized his brother was trying to block out the noise. Using the keen insight gained from 500 years of experience, Fang Yuan recognized his aunt and uncle's scheming nature. He realized they had given him Shun Shui to monitor him while providing his brother with an old nurse to sow discord and resentment between them. He understood that people were often less concerned about receiving little and more concerned about perceived inequality. In his past life, his lack of experience and his brother's naivety allowed their relatives to successfully drive a wedge between them. With the awakening ceremony approaching, Fang Yuan knew he had the wisdom and means to change the situation. He could suppress his brother entirely, take Shin Shui as a concubine, and outmaneuver his relatives and the clan elders in hundreds of ways. However, he felt no desire to do so. He sighed carefreely, concluding that without loyalty or love, his brother was just an outsider and Shun Shui was merely a heap of flesh. He viewed his aunt, uncle, and the elders as mere passers-by in his life and felt that wasting energy on them was unnecessary. He decided that as long as they did not obstruct him, they could simply move aside and leave him alone.